Hello everyone, it's Ken. The Castlevania chapter has been on DVD for roughly a day now, and I want to give my opinions about the chapter in its entirety. From the new Survivor and their cosmetics, to their perks, to their overall feel, because oddly enough, the Survivor feels different, hard to explain, and then also the killer. Now I want to preface this video by saying that I'm not a huge Castlevania fan. I've definitely played the series before and played it very extensively, so I'm more of a casual fan of the series, but I wouldn't say I'm a hardcore fan. My favorite game in the series is definitely Symphony of the Night. So when it comes to how the kid's represented in this chapter, I'm not a huge person to really go for an opinion on that. As long as the characters are here and they look the same, I really don't care all too much. The survivor we got with this chapter is Trevor Belmont. Trevor comes with 5 cosmetics, his default, his 3 premium cosmetics, and his prestige cosmetic. I think all 3 of his premium cosmetics are pretty good, but I can see the average player who isn't a Castlevania fan not liking the classic style skin. For those who don't know, it's the Simon Belmont skin, and I do think a lot of people who haven't played the Castlevania series won't be a huge fan of it, and even as somebody who likes the Castlevania series, I don't see myself using it. However, I believe Leon Belmont outfit and also the Alucard outfit are very good. They're decently priced, but I am a bit of a complainer when it comes to no recolors. I like recolors, especially when we have a really good base outfit, and I think, personally for me at least, I do think Trevor has one of the best default outfits in the entire game, so he would have had a great selection of recolors unless they just somehow botched the recolors entirely. Now, even though I would like to have recolors, the skins we do have are great with the exception of one, and overall I do think they are very well designed and look great, and I can see myself playing Trevor just for his skins. Now let's move on to his perks. The first perk he has is Eyes of Belmont. When a generator is completed, you see the killer's aura, and whenever you see the killer's aura in any other way, it's extended by a certain amount of time. I believe the level 3 values are 3 seconds to see them after generator completion, and then 2 seconds of extended aura rating time for all the aura rating. This is pretty much a better Lethal Pursuer for survivors, because for killer, Lethal Pursuer is only initially used at the beginning of the match and then never again, and is used to extend the duration of all other aura rating, but then you can actually use this perk throughout the entirety of the match. Now, I do think aura rating is much more powerful on the side of killer and can definitely shift the game a lot more, so having a more powerful version of this perk on the survivor's end isn't as bad. So I can see quite a few aura rating builds being much more powerful with this perk, but do keep in mind it only extends aura rating if the aura rating is a duration, so things like a key will not count. The next perk is Occultation. I'm probably mispronouncing that terribly, but to explain how this perk works, every time you stun the killer, you immediately recharge 25% of the charges of your item, and then also upgrade its tier, and I believe it has a 30-second cooldown. This perk is definitely interesting. I think it's something a lot of people have been asking for over the years, some way to upgrade pre-existing items to a better tier. However, one thing that I have to complain about is that we still don't have the ability to take the upgraded items out of the trial. They have said in the dev notes that they're going to be making this a feature in the future, but it's currently not in the game. I'm assuming with the next major chapter or next major update, we're going to be getting it. So currently, I can't recommend it, but once it gets that change, I can recommend it to give all those shitty items some semblance of use, especially if you want to turn a yellow flashlight into a purple flashlight, which is infinitely more useful. For example, you can use something like a broken key as well to turn into a skeleton key in order to turn that skeleton key into an aura rating key, which is really powerful. And his last perk is Moment of Glory. This perk can activate either by opening or rummaging through 2 chests, which adds a bit of variability in your build. And then once you become injured, you then become broken. And then after 60 seconds, you can heal, I believe, 1 health state. I don't think you can ever do this again throughout the match, and it's pretty cool. I think any sort of auto healing is pretty sought after in the DVD community, from plot twist to the syringe, and overall, this one isn't too different. It pretty much guarantees that you're gonna get healed. I can see this especially working if the killer seems to be tunneling you very early on in the match and you're looping them very efficiently and you get hit. I can definitely see how this perk can definitely save you from going down early. Now, there is a few caveats with this perk. For example, if you're already broken, it won't activate, and then also, if at any time during its effects you get put into the dying state, you will not be able to activate like most other insta-heals. Overall, Trevor Belmont's perks aren't exactly the most desirable, but I can definitely see some very niche and off-meta builds being powerful and being really fun to play as. And overall, him as a character, his outfits, and his voice lines are very cool, and I can definitely see him being my other main other than Sable, but we all know Sable will be the best main ever. And then let's move on to the star of the show, the Dark Lord, or Dracula. Dracula only comes with 2 premium cosmetics and 2 non-premium cosmetics, of course being Prestige and Default. And he has one less thing that Trevor does, and that is there is no legendary skin that changes his animations or changes his voice lines. And oddly enough, Trevor affects his lines more than Dracula himself. Because if Trevor is using the Alucard skin, of course, Dracula is only going to be talking about Alucard, as he is the son of Dracula. But his 2 premium cosmetics don't add anything when it comes to voice lines to his character, at least that I know of. His classic skin does not translate as much as I would like it to. There are some classic skins that translate very well, like Wesker for example, but in this case, I don't really think it translates all too well to DBD. And then his second premium cosmetic is Chronicle of Terror, and I think it's also alright. I personally think it's just a bit odd at times. I'm not a huge fan of it. I can't remember what Castlevania it's from, if any. It might be a complete set created just for DBD, so I don't personally recognize it to any Castlevania game that I know of, so it could be one made exclusively for DBD, but I'm not going to say right now as I'm not 100% sure. Now let's move on to Dracula's perks. Dracula's first perk I want to talk about is Dominance. Each time a survivor first interacts with a chest or a totem for the first time, it gets blocked for 8 seconds. This can only happen 1 time per totem. However, I haven't tested if something like Pentimento is affected differently. For example, if it's cleansed and then you make Pentimento, does it then get blocked again? I haven't tested, so I can't say for sure. I can definitely see this perk a lot more usable on any killer that's able to interrupt people working on totems. I don't think it's all too usable on a majority of killers though. But I can definitely see how it could save you from losing a Hex very early on if you manage to interrupt them. His next perk is Hex Wretched Fate. After 1 generator is completed, a random dull totem becomes a Hex totem and curses the Obsession. The Obsession will now pretty much do gens 33% slower, and they can see the totem within 12 meters themselves, and this effect will persist until the totem is cleansed. I can definitely see this perk working very, very well with something like Pentimento, forcing the Obsession to cleanse a totem, and then you relight the totem as a Pentimento, and then also running something like Plaything, which forces everybody else to cleanse totems. I can see some very, very nasty and mean Hex builds here. And let's move on to his last perk, but oddly enough his most interesting perk, Human Greed. With his perks, you can not only see the auras of unopened chests, but you can also see any survivor that walks within an 8-meter range of those chests for 3 seconds, and this means that this effect is affected by Lethal Pursuer because it has a definite time. You can also kick chests, which is kind of really weird, and this is a 30-second cooldown, and it pretty much reshuts them in order to be more R-reading, and I believe the survivors will unlock these chests 50% faster to negate your R-reading. Overall, his perks are alright, but I want to move on to actually Dracula himself and how he plays, but I do want to start off how it feels to play against him rather than play as him, as I have a bit more experience with that. Dracula definitely does feel like a combination of a ton of different killers, but I do think it's very disingenuous just to boil him down to a weaker version of Pyramid Head, a weaker version of Wesker, and a weaker version of Spirits. I do think that argument is a little stupid because the amount of killers we have in DBD, there is bound to be some overlap, and just simply being a blanket term like, oh, if you're invisible and you can't see survivors, that's Spirit. Oh, if you have an item that can shoot through walls but it doesn't at all, then it's definitely Pyramid Head, and if you have a character that's able to jump forward twice, it's definitely Wesker. It's very, very broad things that can be applied to almost any other character. When it comes to playing against him as a survivor, I can definitely see a lot of counterplay being done here. I have seen myself slow walking whenever I see the bat form. I have seen myself being able to efficiently loop him when he's using Hellfire, as you are able to kind of predict a lot better than him if you'll be hit over an object, mainly because the object seems to have to be around survivor height, or the surface needs to be off the ground. And what I mean by this is, in Gideon Meat Pack, where you actually go into the freezer with all the pigs, you can actually shoot Hellfire through them, because technically they're not on the ground, they're more hovering above it, so you can shoot Hellfire through it. And as Survivor, you're able to accurately predict more easily than the killer, oddly enough, if Hellfire will hit you, because if you can see your head over the object, he can shoot through it usually. And then his wolf form definitely has a lot of readability that someone like Wesker doesn't have, because Wesker can use his bounds at any time afterwards, unless he runs that time, of course. He might be running egg. But in the case of Dracula, he has more of a determined time of when the wolf will actually pounce forward. And I can definitely see how this can cause you to get hits that you probably shouldn't, or cause you to not get hits that you could have, because the entire thing of the killer automatically pouncing forward at a certain time and not being controllable. So overall, I do have a decent amount of fun playing against him. I don't feel like I'm ever put in very unfair situations. I don't feel like I'm put in unwinnable situations like I am with a lot of killers nowadays. There are plenty of killers out there that I do think are able to completely negate certain loops, and I do think this killer is not one of them. Now let's move on to playing as Dracula, and overall, I'm not a huge fan. I do think that the weakest part of his kits is the wolf form and Hellfire. I think the wolf form still feels sluggish by comparison. Now, nowhere near as sluggish as the PTB, but overall it just feels like a weaker form of himself. And I do think Hellfire needs a little bit of boost of power, because I mainly just don't enjoy using it, as its inconsistency is just how DBD is. DBD overall is a very inconsistent game when it comes to powers, and especially when powers require certain hitboxes to work. The way that DBD's hitboxes and collisions work is just bound to be a very annoying experience. And oddly enough, his power has a very weird delay where it kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but when you summon the Hellfire and you move to the right, for example, like you see in the footage here, you can see that it actually summons to my left because it has like a second delay before it comes up. It just feels weird and kind of sluggish to see this. I would prefer that if the power would kind of follow you, and when it gets summoned, then it stays in place, rather than staying in place the second you use it, and then when it gets shot up, then it's stuck there. I don't know, it's weird. But overall, with the Castlevania chapter, I am very mixed in some ways, but also very happy in some ways. I think Dracula and Trevor's overall presentation is very good, including their trailers and their outfits and their voice lines. I do think this is one of the times where pretty much all the perks can lead to very interesting builds, rather than a few of them being for the trash can. And I do enjoy playing against Dracula a lot more than I do playing as him, which is kind of odd. I would give this chapter maybe somewhere in a 7 out of 10, and I think the 3 is mainly brought down by how much I don't enjoy playing Dracula. But overall, I do enjoy the chapter, and without further ado, I do hope you all enjoy this little overview / opinion video, and I will see you all in my next video, whenever that is, probably in 7 years. But yeah, without further ado, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, night, morning, whatever it is for you. Bye.